So welcome once again. It is my really great pleasure to welcome you on behalf of both the UN Institute for Disarmament Research, UNIDIR, and UNDP's Regional Small Arms and Light Weapons Control Program in Southeast and East Europe, SEESAC. I'm very happy that we joined forces in organizing today's event, focusing on gender-responsive implementation of key arms control instruments, the UN Programme of Action on Small Arms and Light Weapons, and the Arms Trade Treaty in the Eastern European region. In the last 2 decades, we have seen a gradual convergence of global agendas on sustainable development, gender equality, the sustaining peace agenda, and small arms and light weapons control. And in that regard, there is a growing recognition that in implementing small arms regulatory instruments and other relevant global frameworks, such as the Programme of Action and the Arms Trade Treaty, governments must fully take into account the gender dimension. We hear this very often, but what does this actually mean and why is it important? Let me share some key data from Southeast Europe, which illustrates why gender is such an essential element of any effective arms control and why it is central to our discussion today on the implementation of the UN PoA and the Arms Trade Treaty. More than 97% of all firearms in the region are owned by men, compared to less than 3% of women. In terms of perceptions, men are more likely than women to perceive firearms as a tool for the protection of their safety, while women are more likely to see them as a threat to their and the safety of their families. Men commit 99% of all firearm incidents. Men also account for the majority of victims of firearm incidents at around 80% compared to 20% of women. While the exposure of men to armed violence, and young men in particular, is evident, men are still proportionately more likely to be perpetrators than victims of firearm incidents. Women, on the other hand, own only a minor share of firearms, hardly ever misuse them, but are 20 times more likely to fall victim to firearms misuse than to misuse them. And when women fall victims, this usually happens in the context of domestic violence. And such data is not specific only for Southeast Europe. It tells us that no matter whether we want to address the demand for firearms, control the proliferation, combat the misuse and reduce the effects on the safety and well-being of our citizens, both women and men, the gender perspective must be thoroughly integrated in every aspect of arms control and be an integral part of both policymaking and implementation. And given the highly gendered nature of the use of firearms, none of the challenges we face can be successfully addressed if gender concerns are not given due attention. This is particularly the case for gender-based violence, and combating it as well as reducing firearms misuse must go hand in hand. And that also brings us to the occasion on why we gathered today. This year, 2 important events in the field of arms control are taking place. The 4th review conference of the UN PoA will take place in June in New York, while the 10th conference of state parties to ATT will be held in Geneva in August. And both events, but particularly the review conference, which take place every 6 years, present opportunities to reflect on achievements and challenges in ensuring their gender-responsive implementation. And today's event presents also a timely opportunity to discuss such developments in the context of the Eastern European region. We will have the opportunity to hear from experts and practitioners on good practices developed and implemented in the region, but also challenges that stand in the way of more gender-responsive small arms and light weapons control. And in doing so, we will be able to contribute to shaping the agenda, which will provide guidance for all governments on how to further enhance gender responsiveness of arms control. In Southeast Europe, institutions with support from UNDP SEESAC are increasingly making efforts to mainstream the gender perspective across arms control frameworks, providing a blueprint for more gender-responsive policy solutions and contributing to more resilient communities. And in that regard, we are happy to share some lessons learned and practical strategies to push forward the gender-responsive arms control agenda. Once again, it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to today's event, and in particular, my colleague Dragan Bojanic from the SEESAC team and Hana Salama, researcher at UNIDIR, who will deliver expert presentations. And a warm welcome goes to the distinguished panel members, Simona Codrescu, Head of Conventional Arms Unit in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Romania, Ermin Pesto, Head of Small Arms Light Weapons Control Coordination Board and Assistant Minister of Security in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosana Becker, Program Director of FEMPLATS in Serbia, and Renata Dalacqua, Head of the Gender and Disarmament Program UNIDIR, who will deliver the concluding remarks. And the discussion will be moderated by Juliana Buzi from SEESAC. And I now hand over to Hannah from UNIDIR for the first expert presentation. So Hannah, over to you.
Thank you, Bojana, and thank you everybody for being here on this Friday afternoon. So as Bojana said, my name is Hannah and I'm the researcher on the Gender and Disarmament Program at UNIDIR. My colleague is kindly sharing the presentation, and I just wanted to say, so my presentation will be focused on the Arms Trade Treaty, and Dragan will focus on the UN PoA. So the Arms Trade Treaty is an international treaty that regulates the international trade in conventional arms, and it seeks to prevent and eradicate the illicit trade and diversion of conventional arms. So it's wider than just small arms and light weapons. It covers 8 categories of weapons, but it's also a really important tool in small arms control because it's a legally binding instrument. In addition, it's really an important tool when we're considering gender, because it's one of the few treaties which has explicit consideration of genders by having a specific provision aimed at preventing gender-based violence. The ATT has 113 state parties, and I did a bit of research. There's 15 of them of the state parties are in the Eastern Europe region. So as I said, while the UN PoA deals with the illicit trade of small arms, the Arms Trade Treaty deals mainly with the legal transfers of weapons, but it also recognized that even the legal transfer of weapons has a harmful gendered impacts if these weapons are misused, as Bojana said, or if they are diverted. So I think we heard some very interesting data points from Bojana, and the Southeast Europe region in particular has very rich data, but in general, we can say that there is a lack of disaggregated data on lethal and non-lethal violence that is perpetrated by weapons and specifically firearms. But from the data that we do have, as Bojana had noted and others as well, the majority of victims of firearm-related deaths are men, but also the perpetrators, and this is on a global level, and this data comes from the Small Arms Survey. But women are particularly vulnerable to certain types of armed violence, and it's not necessarily lethal armed violence. So according to UNODC, women and girls constitute the majority, 55% of victims of intimate partner violence or family member homicides. In countries with the highest rate of femicides, small arms are used in almost a third of cases, and this is quite, old data, and I'd be really interested in hearing on more recent data as well. And in terms of in conflict-related sexual violence mainly affects girls and women. And in these types of incidents, UNIDIR published a study that found that 70 to 90% of incidents involve a firearm. And it's not necessarily to harm or injure the survivor of conflict-related sexual violence, but it can also be used to threaten and force them into acts against their will. So here, as we note, there is a significant role that firearms and small arms and light weapons play in all types of gender violence, whether it's in armed conflict or in peacetime. And going back to the ATT, the provisions that address and recognizes these risks is Article 7.4, which requires states to carry out risk assessments on the risks that exported arms or related items can be used to commit or facilitate serious acts of GBV. In addition, states are required to to consider implementing mitigation measures to mitigate the risk of GBV. The 2019 Fifth Conference of State Party was a very important conference for gender in this treaty, and it was actually held under the Latvian presidency under the theme of gender-based violence. And this was really a milestone because during CSP 5, states adopted a number of decisions and recommendations related to gender in the treaty. So first, they sought to strengthen the implementation of Article 7.4 of the GBV-related risk assessment. They also encourage states to improve statistical analysis or the collection of disaggregated data and to further understand the gendered impact of armed violence. And they also requested to improve the gender balance and gender representation in meetings on the ATT or in official meetings. So here we can see that, you know, there is very good progress, but unfortunately, we've had some challenges in implementing what we see on paper. So just to have a look at the challenges on the next slide. I think one of the major challenges that we see is that to date, only one state party has said that they denied a transfer for gender considerations or in part for gender considerations based on Article 7.1 or 7.4 of the ATT. And this basically was part of a survey that the Control Arms did, where one of the states did say that they had denied transfers on these grounds in part again, but this was a very limited survey with only 8 respondents. And still, since the treaty has come into force, we've only had one state really come out to say that they've used this in their decisions. A couple of states actually, as part of this survey, did say that they did cite Article 7.1 and 7.4 in their decisions on arms transfers. But often the problem is that export licensing officers cite that there is a lack of specific data linking arms with gender-based violence. So it's a challenge for them to consider this in their export risk assessment. There's also a challenge in terms of mitigation measures and what this means for GBV in particular. I think that there is a lack of understanding on what this could be, or a lack of a common understanding. In the Control Arms survey, which again received very limited response, one state mentioned that they included specific references in end user documents or other documents related to arms control as a mitigation measure. So I think that there's lots of scope to do more on this. And regarding gender representation in treaty meetings, the Secretariat, but also UNIDIR, we've been keeping track of the representation, and we've noted that since CSP 5, actually, women are still underrepresented, and they only compromise on average 34% of diplomats that are in CSPs. And then when we look at, you know, these are in terms of decision makings and policy making, but in terms of implementation of arms control and specifically weapons and ammunition management that is related to this, we see that the proportion is even lower, according to a study that UNIDIR conducted in 2021. So finally, just to say that this was to give an overview of the, you know, the success we've had so far in the treaty and the challenges, but we also wanted to share some ideas of what can be done at a national level and at an international level to advance gender perspectives in the treaty and to overcome some of these challenges. And I really look forward to hear from the states themselves about further ideas that we can work on together also from the region. So at a national level, I think as I had said before, strengthening national data collection mechanisms on gender-based violence to include the means of harm type of weapon is really key action that states can take at a national level. And I'm really keen to hear about good experiences and challenges in the region from this regard. And then when we come to improving women's participation in policies related to small arms control, I think that we can ensure inclusive participation in meetings, also have the idea to have a wider and broader stakeholders when it comes to arms control. So including, gender ministries, including feminist organizations or women's organizations, but also survivor organizations will be really key at a national level. And then when we look at technical arms control, there is a number of actions that states can take and recommendations that we had from our report on women's participation in technical arms control. And this includes, opening up training opportunities for civilians in the field, ensuring that security institutions are inclusive through gender-sensitive policies, and creating networks for women professionals in this field to support them and enhance their visibility by actually inviting them to some of these multilateral meetings that we are talking about. Then at an international level, I think this year for the ATT, there are many key opportunities with Romania as the chair to strengthen the implementation. Just to also say that last year, the CSP9, the outcome document, encouraged state parties to keep the risk of conventional arms being used to commit or facilitate serious acts of gender-based violence or serious acts of violence against women and children as an important topic moving forward, and then initiate a discussion, an exchange of information and good practices in this CSP10 cycle. So this could mean, a number of different things. From our perspective, states can really start engaging in concrete discussions on GBV risk assessments and share good practice. And they can also promote a better through these kinds of discussions, we can gain a better understanding of what we mean by GBV risk mitigation measures and share best practices on data collection. Under this year's CSP theme, I won't spend a lot of time on it because we have the chair, Romania, on our panel, but it is interagency cooperation. And it's a very interesting theme because I think that we can also use this as an opportunity to promote interagency cooperation between agencies that are working on preventing gender-based violence, agencies that are working on women, peace and security, export control agencies, and gender equality ministries. One idea could be actually for this year's CSP is to bring one of these agencies, these gender equality agencies, to your delegation or somebody who's working on WPS, for example. And then finally, under the working group on treaty implementation, there has been a proposal from last year already for the creation of a good practice guide. This on GBV risk assessments or on preventing gender-based violence through the ATT. This was championed by Argentina. And supporting this initiative, I think, will be really key in promoting a better understanding of risk assessments and really helping to prevent gender-based violence by leveraging the ATT. So these are just a few ideas, and I will close here and look forward to the discussion, and I will pass it on to Dragan from UNDP SEESAC. Thank you.
Dragan, you're muted.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon again from my side. It's a really great pleasure to be with you today, and I hope that you can see my presentation. Okay, so as Hannah mentioned, my presentation will basically focus on the UN program of action to prevent, combat, and eradicate illicit trade of small arms and light weapons. And I will provide some like a background information on this document. And after that, I will focus more on the developments in Southeast Europe so that we can see how developments in the region are linked to the global development. As you might know, UN PoA was adopted in 2001 by a General Assembly, and it is a politically binding instrument. And its adoption meant that there was an international established framework for SAL control, which covers a very diverse spectrum of issues, including the improved national small arms control legislation, establishment of relevant institutional frameworks, measures to control import and export on small arms, and so on and so on. When it comes to gender equality, we really have to recognize that the original document from 2001 had like a very limited referencing to gender equality, and that only in the preamble the negative impact of illicit trade of SAL was mentioned, its negative effect on women. But apart from that, there was not much in the UN PoA. However, since then, there has been a significant progress achieved, and this is particularly true for the last decade. We can see that particularly since 2016, that there is a progressive inclusion of gendered language and gender provision, and that on the biannual meeting of states, but also in a review conference, that gender is increasingly seen as a central to the implementation of the UN PoA. For instance, we can see that in the outcome document of the third review conference, which was held in 2018, that there was a quite comprehensive gender agenda agreed by the governments, and that the document particularly highlighted the negative, but also differing impact of SAL on women and men, boys on girls. What is particularly important is the document links the eradication of illicit trade, and it's recognized as a key part of elimination of the gender-based violence. That's something that we clearly see in the region. And for instance, the data that we are collecting shows that more than 90% of firearms being misused in the context of domestic violence in the region is in illegal possession. So that is like a really of crucial importance for us. Then states are also being encouraged to mainstream the gender consideration in their small arms control policies, programs, and projects to improve the data collection, but also to use data for gender analysis to inform the policy development, to encourage the full participation and representation of women, which is seen as a precondition for gender responsive policy making and implementation. And also, as Hannah mentioned, there is a lot of discussion of the improved coordination between small arms control authorities with gender equality agencies, but also with women's organization. When it comes to global level, we can see that there has been a lot of progress, but that progress remains quite uneven. And we see that in the last circle of reporting that more than 50% of governments who submitted the report said that they are taking into consideration gender aspect of small arms control. But for instance, only 30% of them reported collecting disaggregated data. And this lack of data remains a challenge. It really hinders our understanding of the problems, but also the progress achieved. And bearing in mind that the last review conference was in 2018, and the fourth one will be held this year, I believe that this really provides us a timely opportunity to reflect and discuss on what were developments in the region in this period. It is also important to provide some historical context so that we understand what was the starting points, and then we will better understand where we are now. And in 2016, we at SEESAC conducted the regional gender and South study, which we wanted to map what are the main gender concerns related to small arms, but then also to assess to what extent this is taken into consideration by relevant strategies and legislation. Our analysis clearly showed that basically the dominant approach in policies and legislation was quite gender blind, and the gender perspective had not been really integrated into relevant frameworks. That issues which are now in the center of our discussion, such as the linkages between firearms and gender-based violence, or the role of masculinity in shaping demand and misuse for firearms, were not really on top of the agenda. Our analysis also showed that there are many, that there are like multiple reasons which led to this. And for instance, there were insufficient institutional capacities for gender mainstreaming. There was a lack of data and gender analysis, which made this gender aspect of small arms invisible. And there was an underrepresentation of women's organizations and gender experts in policy making, which then hindered the development of more gender responsive solutions. Ever since then, in close cooperation with authorities in the region, we have been working hard to reverse these trends and to put the gender from the margins to the core of small arms control policy making. And there have been really a lot of activities aimed at building capacities of relevant institutions to mainstream gender in their work, to establish gender responsive legislative and policy framework, to ensure that relevant data is available and it is used for research and to inform the policy development, then to increase the participation of women in arms control policy making, but also to raise the awareness of general audience on the linkages between gender and firearms. What we see is that due to this really concerted efforts in the region, that this led to significant changes in the policy landscape in Southeast Europe. And we are witnessing the strength and consensus on the importance of the gender perspective of small arms control, both among decision makers, policy makers, but also the wider audience. There have been a significant increase in the knowledge on links between gender and small arms control due to intense research and data collection exercises in the region. We also see that the capacities of relevant institutions were increased, and this is also visible in the shift in the policies. And for instance, this new generation of self-control strategies and action plans in the region, particularly those that were adopted after the adoption of the Western Balkan self-control roadmap, they contain multiple measures to address the gender aspect of small arms and to integrate the gender perspective. And for instance, we see that self-control strategy make effort to address the links between firearms and domestic violence. We see that there are specific measures targeting young men. There are also measures to increase the participation of women in self-control or to improve the availability of the data. So there have been quite a significant shift in the approach from predominantly gender blind to increasingly gender responsive policy and legislative framework. What is currently going on and what is in focus is really the support to institutions to implement these commitments, and particularly to integrate the gender perspective in the operational small arms and light weapons control, because this is basically where the added value of gender mainstreaming could be the best demonstrated, and this is where we can see the impact of gender mainstreaming. For instance, we are currently developing several specific tools, such as for gender responsive firearm license approval, or for the risk assessment of firearms being misused on domestic violence, which will be coupled with training for police officers. This is being done through region-wide consultative processes, and in doing so, we also really made effort to involve women's organizations. For instance, 19 women's organizations from the region participated in different aspects on development of these tools. There is also a further work going on the research, because we really have to have updated data to understand the problems that we are facing. And there are activities undertaken, including the research on women's participation in small arms control. And this brings us to the last slide of my presentation, which is basically both about challenges and the ways forward, because we see the challenges are giving us the opportunity to address them and to move, to push things forward. What I believe that it's really important that we keep the momentum for gender responsive small arms control, but also to ensure the long-term approach. Many of the things that we are trying to address through our work are deeply embedded in social structure here, and there are no quick fixes. So we really have to have a long-term approach in order to effectively address them. Also, the priority for the future period will be really to continue the integration of the gender perspective into the operational small arms control to ensure continuous capacity building. We see that also, despite some significant progress, that challenges still remain, that the misuse of firearms, domestic violence is persistent, that the link between man masculinity as firearms is also persistent. So we need really further measures to address them. Despite also some important progress, the participation of women in the small arms control still remains limited, and that's something that we will tackle also in the future period. And as I said, the constant improvement of data collection is very important, because that really enables us to understand the problems that we are facing. So that would be, in a nutshell, about the global and the regional situation. And I'm looking forward to take any question later in the discussion. But now I give the floor to my colleague, Juliana.
Thank you very much, Dragan. Thanks indeed. And before we go into the next part of this discussion, actually, let me thank both you and Hannah for these very informative presentations, and also bringing your insights on why gender mainstreaming and how gender is mainstream into important international instruments, including both the Arms Trade Treaty, but also the UN Program of Action, why it actually does matter, the gender mainstreaming, but also bringing some concrete progress, in particular the practical examples from from Southeast Europe, as well as the challenges that both of you highlighted, but as Dragan, you mentioned, seeing them also as opportunities as well to move forward. The next part of the discussion will focus into looking in practice at concrete actions taken in different countries, but also priorities and also challenges in integrating gender perspective in all its dimensions. For this, given Romania's actually leadership in the Arms Trade Treaty process, we have invited first Ms. Simona Codrescu, who actually is the head of the Conventional Arms Unit in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Romania, to provide us with some reflections on her side on first, what are Romania's priorities with regards to gender and conventional arms control? What are some of the opportunities and actions that they are pursuing this year on gender and arms control, and whether they see any challenges in the implementation of such actions. Ms. Codrescu, just let me introduce you briefly first, has over 18 years of experience in the field of conventional arms transfers and over 10 years with the Conventional Arms Unit at the Department for Exports Control in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Romania. She is the Romanian representative to the Arms Trade Treaty, Wassenaar Arrangement, and other EU and international forums on exports control on conventional arms. Ms. Codrescu, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Juliana, and thank you all for having me be part of this conversation. We are honored, and I have to say, for me personally, it's actually a first. To begin on, well, say a positive note, not that I intend to carry on in another way, but just to say, considering what Hannah said about gender representation, I have to say that ever since I've been a part of the Conventional Arms Unit in the Department for Export Controls, the unit has been led by women. So yeah, it's an anecdotal fact, more or less. But as far as we are concerned, and representation in the ATT and Wassenaar Arrangement and COARM has been has been with women. So I think we're okay based on this criteria. But leaving that aside, just to frame a little bit my my intervention, I have to say that the matter of arms control in Romania is the competence is split between the Department for Export Controls, which handles the exports and imports of conventional arms, but for military end use, and the Romanian police is part of the Ministry of Interior, which handles as a licensing body control over firearms imports and exports for civilian use. Now, the reason I want to split this is that the analysis, while for exports is somehow similar, the analysis for imports, which are quite important in our experience as a tool of control over the use of small arms and light weapons, is different. So from the perspective of gender-based violence linked with arms transfers, there are two points of view which can be seen, and I will mainly focus on what happens in the assessment of exports, so transfers as based on the ATT. For imports, as far as we are concerned, the end user is only government institutions. So there are different approaches to the matter of gender-based violence. As an exporter of firearms, and actually of conventional arms, and as an importer, and what happens on the domestic market with the imports. So covering the risk assessment for conventional arms, in particular for small arms and light weapons, the CSP5, if I'm not mistaken, 2015, where the priority theme was gender-based violence, was a turning point for Romania as well, because father to CSP is CSP5, I think, we have amended our procedures for risk assessment of exports to include aspects relating specifically to the risk of facilitation of gender-based violence. While this competence is somehow shared between ANCHEX, the Department for Export Control as a licensing authority, and our colleagues from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which make the analysis from the political perspective, which also includes aspects related to human rights violations, which includes gender-based violence. It was a turning point in our experience, because that was the starting point of understanding and building awareness, and at our end as licensing officers, but also with our colleagues in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as to the importance and the impact of gender-based violence, because that was somehow overshadowed in our analysis by its inclusion in human rights violation. So the challenge that was pointed by Hannah previously is the lack of specific statistical data to fundament a potential denial, and the information, relevant official information from the destination country or for official sources regarding gender-based violence in the destination country, so that we can use it to fundament a denial. Which brings me sort of to another challenge that we have as a licensing officer when using this specific criterion for a denial. And this has to do with the legal grounding of the denial, which we are open to being challenged in court by the applicant. And this is a risk which has to be taken into account by the licensing authority. So unless a very sound legal basis is presented to a denial, there is a chance, there is a risk, a significant risk, to face legal proceedings further to the denial. So I think this is something that is or should be an incentive to continue the discussion with the involvement of licensing officers for exports. And this is something, and I will come back to the ATT on that, to continue the discussion and to bring practitioners to the table and to the discussion to see how this can be solved, either through their legal, let's say, grounding. I would be really interested as head of the Conventional Arms Unit and the licensing authority to hear from other states how they can sustain their denial on the grounds of 7.4. And that would be really good practice for our end. And also to seek, with the help of the civil society, which provides most of the data, and research community, which provides most of the data available on the incidence of firearms-related gender-based violence, to see how we can bring this forward to be taken into account. So these would be two lines of action we would see. And bringing back the discussion to the ATT, I think this has already started, because what we had as a follow-up to CSP9, and we keep seeing this, CSP9 and CSP10 both are sort of a turning point in the way the ATT works. We have had now the first change of format for the working groups, especially the working group on effective treaty implementation, with a new focus on concrete discussions of practical exchanges linked to several topics, among which was gender-based violence. So we had the first dedicated discussion based on the questionnaire presented by Argentina, and as well as based on the document introduced by Spain, Mexico, and Small Arms Survey, which hint to the need for a deeper conversation on the problem of prevention of gender-based violence related to conventional arms transfers. And allowing a dedicated and focused discussion in the sub-working group of the Vigeti for the first time in February, and continuing this discussion in the next cycle, CSP 11 and beyond. This creates a platform where such sharing of experiences can happen. So I think the ATT, outside of being really the first binding international treaty focusing or talking about gender-based violence and pointing to gender-based violence to be taken into account as a criteria in the risk assessment of conventional arms transfers, is also the place or the forum to deepen the conversation and to bring solutions to how, because I think this is what's missing from the perspective of a practitioner, again, of someone or my colleagues applying the treaty in our daily work, in the daily risk assessment of export licenses. So I think if you want, the ATT, and this is one of the well, it wasn't a priority, it was one of the intentions of the Romanian presidency to have concrete conversation and exchanges of practices, of examples on all topics of discussion, especially in the Vigeti group of the ATT. Now, moving on to priorities. Our priority theme that Hannah mentioned, that has to do with the interagency cooperation. And by the way, thank you very much, Hannah, for the idea of bringing partner entities, state entities involved in gender-based violence to CSP 10. It is something we are going to definitely work on and see if they can join us. But this has highlighted the way we talk to other institutions, and the Argentinian paper as well highlighted in our experience what are other state agencies involved in this topic. And we have discovered that we can relate, and it was the first exchange we had with the dedicated body, which is the National Agency for Equal Opportunities Between Women and Men, which has a lot of competencies dealing with gender-based violence, and in connection with the prosecutor's office and the Romanian police, they together with our input can devise an interagency cooperation dedicated to actually further the implementation, and basically the first step is creating awareness, because that would be our role, to create awareness on the importance of gender-based violence related to arms transfers. So that would be our first step, really, to continue the cooperation we have just initiated to answer the Argentinian questionnaire with the prosecutor's office, the Agency for Equality of Chances, and the Romanian police. And our role in this, I think, would be to have an in-reach, as they say, to promote and to present the discussion at the level of the ATT, as well as the POA, and to hint to the best practices and work together on how we can support or how they can support our risk assessment with information. So basically, that's the main priority, to bring the interagency cooperation, first of all, in Romania, in connection to gender-based violence, to strengthen our cooperation with our colleagues from the police department in their risk assessment related to firearms exports for the civilian market, and also to have a better understanding of the statistics actually on the use of firearms for gender-based violence in Romania, because this is something we don't really have. We don't have disaggregated data for the use. So, and this is basically the awareness we would like to bring to the table in interagency cooperation. Yeah, so I think that's that would be the main points we have on gender-based violence.
Thank you.
If you have questions, I'll be glad to take them.
Thank you very much, Ms. Codrescu. This was actually a very insightful and very concrete actually intervention in showing some of the concrete practices followed in Romania, but also some of the challenges that you are facing when it comes to the prevention of gender-based violence, for highlighting also the importance of the analysis of both exports and imports, and also when conducting the risk assessments in preventing the gender-based violence, the importance, of course, of the data and the statistics that you highlighted, as well as the complexity of the legal grounds and legal framework, and in bringing also into implementation when it comes to practical implementation of the obligation when it comes to the Arms Trade Treaty in preventing the gender-based violence. And lastly, but not least important, highlighting the importance of and priority on your side of the interagency cooperation. I think I did not mention at the very beginning, we will have, of course, a session of Q&As at the end of this session. Even though we are really pressed with time, we will definitely have that session, because I believe that there are quite some questions already for the speakers. We'll move first to the next speaker, who is Mr. Ermin Pesto. He is the head of the Small Arms and Light Weapons Coordination Board and the Assistant Minister of Security in Bosnia and Herzegovina. He's also leading the Gender Equality Coordination Board, actually, within the Ministry of Security. He has been leading the efforts on arms control for numerous years in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also has been and is a promoter of the efforts on the gender mainstreaming in arms control, I would say not only in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also throughout the region, in the context of the work of the region of the Western Balkans in this regard. We have invited Mr. Pesto to provide his insight in his view, what is the role of the institutions, in particular of the SAL Coordination Board, in implementing arms control measures in a way that advances gender equality, as well as to share with us any good practices regarding initiative related to arms control and prevention of gender-based violence in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Mr. Pesto, over to you.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, my colleagues. I would like to thank UNIDIR and UNDP SEESAC for invitation for this meeting. It's a great pleasure for me to attend this panel discussion and share my experience in this field. I would like, first of all, to point out the legal and institutional framework of gender equality in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is irrelevant for our today's discussion. Bosnia and Herzegovina has very rich legal and policy framework for advancing gender equality, including within the context of small arms and live weapons control. In the post-conflict context of Bosnia and Herzegovina, we recognize the importance of UN Resolution 3025, Women, Peace and Security, since its adoption, and promoted its full implementation as an opportunity, not only to contribute to gender equality, but also to contribute to the building of sustainable peace and stability, a culture of reconciliation. So far, 3 action plans have been adopted and implemented in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and the 4th action plan for the period 2023-2027 is in the process of the adoption. Those action plans also take into account concerns related to small arms and their impact on women's safety. In addition, 4th Gender Action Plan in Bosnia and Herzegovina as the overall strategy for gender mainstreaming in Bosnia and Herzegovina was adopted by the Bosnia and Herzegovina Council of Ministers in October last year. Gender and security is one of the priority areas on Gender Action Plan of Bosnia and Herzegovina. In addition, institutional mechanisms were put in place for the implementation of these strategic commitments. We had in place Government Coordination Board for monitoring of implementation of Action Plan 3025 and Coordination Board for Gender Action Plan. They are instrumental as they consist of representatives of all relevant government institutions and have greatly contributed to the implementation and promotion of these action plans. Ministry of Security also has established its internal coordination board for the implementation of the law on gender equality. Council of Ministers also established a coordination board to monitor the implementation of the strategy for small arms and live weapons. When preparing a strategy for control of small arms and live weapons, we made a qualitative analysis of the impact of the misuse of firearms and violence against women. Based on the clear analysis and collected statistical data, we prepared an action plan in which we define specific goals that need to be implemented. These goals refer to improving the system of collecting data disaggregated by gender and age on the distribution and impact on firearms and ammunition, increasing the participation of women in decision-making process related to the control of small arms and live weapons, improve the institutional and strategic response to the misuse of firearms within the context of domestic violence and intimate partnership violence, improving cooperation with the media on the importance of adequate reporting on the misuse of small arms and live weapons, and increasing level of awareness of the misuse of firearms in domestic violence. Through our regular coordination meetings, we are also discussing progress made and challenges, and Small Arms and Live Weapons Control Coordination Board plays a key role in these processes. On the basis of the previously defined goals and European Union decision, as well as available financial resources, in the past period, in cooperation with SEESAC and UNDP, we conducted several projects with the aim to raise awareness in this area. Moreover, we prepared concrete guidelines for further action. For example, in cooperation with SEESAC, we have prepared guidelines and instructions for police officers, tool for gender responsive licensing and for risk assessment of firearms misuse in domestic violence, which will help when assessing the issuance of weapon licenses in order to prevent those weapons falling into the hands of persons who may abuse them in domestic violence. In the forthcoming period, we will continue the capacity building of police officers to use these tools. As a part of the project with the non-governmental organization, the Ministry of Security also prepared and adopted the document Gender Equality Policy in the Ministry of Security, which additionally promotes and provides a framework for achieving gender equality in the Ministry of Security. Also, the text of the instructions for the use of gender sensitive language in the Ministry of Security was prepared. As a part of this project, we also created our own website, which promotes activities related to gender equality carried out in the Ministry of Security. Another example refers to the recently completed campaign named Respect Life, Not Weapons, organized in cooperation with UNDP and Coordination Board, which lasted for 6 months from September 2023 March 2024. The first phase of the campaign had a clear focus on issue of femicide, which was addressed through a series of activities such as broadcast of video and radio jingles, participation of Bosnia-Herzegovina Small Arms and Live Weapons Control Coordination Board chair and police agencies in TV and radio shows, as well as campaign on different social media platforms. I hope that through the examples I have mentioned today, you could get a clearer insight into the gender equality institutional framework of Bosnia-Herzegovina, gender mainstreaming ideas and collaboration which we are involved into, as well as action and positive practices that we continuously focus on in order to promote the importance of gender equality and point to the impact it may have on every single part of our society. This is from my side, and feel free to ask any questions. I am at your proposal, on your disposal, sorry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pesto. Thank you also for bringing some very concrete measures actually taken by Bosnia and Herzegovina when it comes to mainstreaming gender specifically into the small arms and light weapons control, measures at the policy level and also mechanisms established for this purpose, but also highlighting the role of each of these institutions, in particular in monitoring the implementation of the strategies, as well as the proactive approach in conducting the analysis when it comes to look at the impact that the firearms have on both women and men, on also the concrete examples that you provided on the raising of awareness when it comes to the use of firearms in domestic violence, and also on gender equality, as well as on the use of gender sensitive data, actually very important points. Thank you once again, and then I will also now go to the last but not least important, of course, speaker. It is my pleasure actually to present Ms. Kostana Becker, who is the Program Director of FEMPLAS Serbia. FEMPLAS is a civil society organization that promotes women's rights and gender equality in Serbia, but also throughout the region. Ms. Becker has obtained a PhD degree at the Center for Gender Studies at the University of Novi Sad on topic of intersectional discrimination of women. She has been a human rights activist and lawyer for many years, particularly in the area of women's rights. Currently, she's a program director of women's rights organization, as I mentioned, FEMPLAS. We have invited Ms. Becker to actually provide some insights on how does she see the priorities for gender responsive arms control from the perspective, and very important perspective, of civil society, and from the perspective of combating violence against women, and how can we further advance this agenda, ensure active involvement of civil society in this region. Ms. Becker, the word is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. Now I have really, I need to be, because I'm the only representative of civil sector and women's rights organizations. So I hope that I will, that my intervention, would be representative for the women's organizations in the region. And before I answer those questions, I would, because we heard a lot today, and it's very, very important and insightful. I would just like to say that everything in the society, no matter if it's public or private life, is gendered. And I'm really happy to see that those sectors where usually gender considerations were neglected before now are increasingly becoming gender responsive. As Dragan said today, that's really good step forward. But on the other hand, for the perspective of civil society, and especially women's rights organizations, that's not fast enough because all positive steps and steps forward are, from our perspectives, are too slow because we're putting a lot of effort in it. So, for example, today two speakers mentioned femicides and also this data that we more don't have than have because we don't have in many systems we don't have the data collection, like proper data collection. They can say that because we are dealing in the region with that topic for last 5 years, and our like basic data collection method is media. And not only when I say our, I mean also the other organization, Western Balkans region. So, but what we extensively research case law in 6 jurisdictions of Western Balkans related to femicides, and we can confirm that here also around 1/3 of all femicides are conducted with misuse of firearms. But actually, what is worth of mentioning that in lots of those cases, we have a femicide followed by suicide. So then we don't have like this judicial response. And that's also one of the things, the topics that should be further researched, although some anecdotal research exists. And having said that, I also would love to, because I'm not going later back on our research, but I would love to say that UNDP in Serbia supported one research on case law in Serbia that was not regional on domestic violence and misuse of firearms. And then we realized that we know that, let's say, penal policy in the region is not so, it's lenient towards violence against women. But actually, we were surprised that even when violence is conducted by misuse of firearms, penal policy still is very lenient. So it means that perpetrators are getting like minimum sentences. And we also had one case that a man, he was sentenced for attempted femicide committed with the misuse of weapons in illegal possession. And he got 6 months. And then judge said that he is successful entrepreneur and that putting him in prison would jeopardize his private business. So then she allowed him to be at home with this GPS surveillance system. So that's why, and without, I think without academia and without civil society organizations, we don't have data like this. So from our perspective, from a women's rights organization perspective, for us, it's very important that in arms control, that we have gender responsive arms control, but that means that we need inclusion of gender perspective throughout the whole system. So we all know that there are different impacts of armed violence on women and girls and men and boys. So I think it's really important for us to actively participate in decision making, also in the dialogue and decision making processes, because we can inform those policies by the experiences and needs of women. And when I say we, I mean that civil rights organizations dealing with women's rights are somehow divided at the moment into two groups. We have one group of organizations like FemPlots, for example, is we do research. We know, we use computers. We know English. We can apply for different projects and so on. But there is also a huge number of grassroots women's organizations who are at the first line providing support to survivors of violence. And they have extremely important experience from, like first-hand experience. They are often not included even at the national level on any kind of discussion on the policies, laws, and similar things, because they don't have sufficient human resources. They don't have enough finances. Sometimes they don't use computers well, and things like that. So I think that's also very important. And during this regional consultation process, I was, very, very glad when I heard that also grassroots organizations were included by SEESAC in the region, because it's their experience is really precious. So maybe, maybe they cannot use this high-level politically correct language in terms of gender responsive self-control, but they have a lot of experience to inform those policies. And then, we need some other people dealing with that to just put it into, this wording that is used today. Then I'm not going to highlight again, because I think it was emphasized today that there is a lot of connected between domestic violence, gender-based violence, and possession of firearms. And it is also so besides like the very violence that we can see and are aware and it's reported, it is also important to have like an idea that weapons, firearms in the house are often used for intimidation and control. And sometimes we don't, so when we talk with women, very often their abusers just use like threats and to coerce them to do or not do things without actually misusing firearms. And that has also a huge impact on mental health of women and their families. And then, of course, it's career for leaving abusive relationship, because you're threatened and then that this could have a little outcome. And then finally, I think that it's very, very important from this perspective of combating violence against women, that we need. So the process is ongoing. So we need to improve mechanisms for this background checks for licenses for firearms to make our governments aware that policies, laws and policies, but also these internal police procedures are should be very gender sensitive, in the sense that that violence against women very often is not reported. So, but those police officers who are conducting background check, if they're trained, they could grasp those things. And no matter if abuser is not reported or not, sentenced for domestic or type of violence against women, they should have that in mind. And we need to do, and that's also important to include women's rights organization, because they're more sensitive towards those issues. And finally, how we can, ensure what should be done to ensure active involvement in future actions regarding these topics. I think that so this is one of the ways, and still and I said that I'm really glad that all of you, I mean, institutions recognize that there is a need for greater involvement of civil society. So I think it could be done through, formal representation. So you can invite representatives to attend, to have formal seats at levels of decision-making bodies related to arms control. Of course, then for policy development, when policies are drafted, treaties and so on, so we can, ensure that gender perspective is embedded from the outset. So not to try to include it afterwards. Then also we need finances. So in order to have proper trainings, resources for us, so that's also, and to enhance advocacy skills and to be able to have formal and informal seats. So, and that's very often, neglected, that we need finances in order to, to run our organizations and to provide expertise on different topics. And also we need more involvement in data and research. I think that our contribution is really important in that sense, but you all are aware that research are very expensive, and that you need experts, but you also need finances if you want to have proper scientific research on different topics. And of course, and finally, we need more networking with all actors involved in let's say gender responsive self-control, so that we have networks across the region, but also globally, so that we all can contribute to have more gender responsive self-control in the future. Thank you. I hope that I didn't, I was within time.
Thank you very much. It was very useful, actually, and very important intervention. Thank you for bringing the critical perspective of the civil society and also highlighting some new points, and bringing up some new points, but highlighting also some of the points that also the other speakers mentioned. You highlighted the comprehensive approach on gender responsive arms control and the engagement of the civil society in this approach in all the processes, actually, and whether this is in a formal or informal, through formal or informal mechanisms, and also including the grassroots organization, and also the importance of capacity building for the grassroots organization. Thanks also for highlighting the issue of looking at the firearm as a mean of threat as well, psychological threat when it comes to gender-based violence, and the improving of the mechanism for background checks. And I hope that the tools that SEESAC has been supporting and has been preparing now for throughout the region, with the feedback and the inputs from all the institutions and the civil society, will be further helping in this regard. I would also now, I think this is, we come to the end of the speaking session, and it's finally time for the questions and comments from your side. Feel free to ask any question to all the speakers, or if you also have any comments on the topics that were raised by any of the speakers, I will be monitoring the screen. Please do raise your hand so that I can see if there are any questions or any requests for the floor. I already see Mr. Markovic, Mladen Markovic, who is the head of the South Commission in Montenegro. Please.
Yes, everybody expects from Mladen to say something. No question for other participants. Maybe one comment from Montenegro side. I would like to address and state that the issue of gender equality has been placed in our daily agenda. We have commenced this effort through our national strategy, further exchange by the roadmap activities, which will serve as a solid foundation for developing detailed activities through our future strategy beyond the year 2024. I want to express my gratitude to everyone for the efforts you invest in strengthening our capacities on this matter. Special thanks to the experts from SEESAC, particularly to Mr. Dragan Bojanic, my trainer, for his dedicated and convincing work and efforts in this regard. With the development of firearms focal point, we have finally obtained gender results and data, which can be used for future risk assessment and necessary analysis, aiming to draw conclusions and recommendations. For now, gender data for victims of firearms are only available for the period starting from 2024. I'd like to say this because Ms. Kostara, if I remember, said collected all data from media. Yes, of course, situation in Montenegro is same. But after full establishment firearm focal point, finally we obtained gender results and data. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mladen, for this very important update, and also raising once again the importance of also publicly available data, as Kostana mentioned also during her intervention, and the importance of the firearms focal points in providing the gender disaggregated data, but also in supporting the analysis as well when it comes to investigations of crimes related to firearms, taking into account also the gender perspective. I see, yes, Ms. Renata Dell'Acqua has raised her hand. Yes, UNIDIR.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Renata Dell'Acqua, and I work at the UN Institute for Disarmament Research, who is organizing this event with Juliana. I really appreciated listening to the three interventions from the panel and also previously from my colleagues. But looking at the panel that we just heard right now, I have a question for the three panelists. You know, this agenda on gender and conventional arms control, it's something that we've been pursuing with partners, both civil society and governments. And I'd like to hear from the panelists if they can share from their perspective, what are the best examples of regional or international cooperation in this area? For instance, from their perspective, when was a time that an international or a regional organization was helpful? And maybe if you have an experience when they weren't helpful, because from my very selfish perspective, I want to understand how we can, you know, work better with you, what we can do more, and also things that you tell us, you know, you don't need to give names, but sometimes maybe international organizations have unrealistic approaches or things like that. So if you could share from your perspective, you know, when can international organizations, regional organizations be helpful to your work and how? I'd really appreciate that. Thank you.
So thank you very much. And I think this question, I mean, maybe I would exclude Dragan and Hana from this question because otherwise they would be speaking about their organizations. But yes, any other from the speakers, Ms. Becker, Mr. Pesto, or Ms. Codrescu, please feel free also to intervene, or Mr. Markovic as well, being a representative of a national institution as well.
Well,
I see both Mr. Pesto and Ms. Becker.
Okay, I will go for my colleague, Mr. Becker, because the ladies always go first, and after her, I will say something.
Thank you, Mr. Pesto. So I will just say that, like in my experience, in this regard, when it concerns like SAL control, it's this SEESAC invitation of civil society organization across the region to take active part in sharing their experiences when during this development of tools for gender-sensitive firearms licensing, and even more important for gender-sensitive acting of police officers in cases of violence against women. So that was really meaningful and important. And I think for like, as far as I heard from other organizations, that was the first time that they were invited to contribute on a specific topic related to arms, and which is, we all know that it's important, but never before being able to participate in that type of events.
Thank you very much, Ms. Becker. Then Mr. Pesto, over to you.
Thank you very much, Juliana. Thank you very much for the question. Very interesting question for me. From my point of view, it's very interesting or very important for the representatives of Bosnia and Herzegovina to have a good cooperation with international organization and also with non-governmental association. I presented in my short speech several examples how can we cooperate with on the institutional level in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also I presented some examples how can we cooperate with international organizations like UNDP, SEESAC, and the others. Also, Dragan mentioned in his presentation what we did in the past together in the region and in cooperation with institutions in the region. And I can remember when we started our work together in 2016. In that period, we didn't have statistical data in this field, and we collected data. We prepared some questionnaire for institutions in the region, and after that we prepared some kind like brochure or small arms survey, and it was the base for our activities. And also we recognized in our strategy document for small arms and light weapons that issue, and it was a really very, very important cooperation in that period. And after that we have developed a lot of projects and we did a lot. Now we can say that we have a correct statistical data, and on the base of that data we have developed a lot of projects, and we have done a lot. Dragan explained in his presentation and gave some comments or results of that, but it's very important for us. Also, we have, as I said in my short speech, we have institutional framework in Bosnia and Herzegovina in this field. We have a gender action plan. We have coordination board who is responsible to monitor gender action plan and implement a lot of activities. And also, I can say that for us, it's very interesting example that we have we adopted or we established, my minister established our in Ministry of Security coordination board for gender equality. It's very important for us because in that board we have contact points in our sectors in Ministry of Security, and we are responsible to monitor, prepare report for our minister. And also we have a very, very good cooperation with civil society organization and the others. You can hear in my short speech that we developed one website when you can of Ministry of Security, and you can see on that website our results, what we did in the past, and it's very interesting example. I can say once again, thank you very much for colleagues, SEESAC, UNDP, UNIDIR, and all international organizations, because without them, I'm pretty sure that we didn't do a lot in the past. Thank you very much.
Thank you once again, Ermin, also for highlighting the important and very comprehensive exercise conducted by the region in 2016 with the general survey, which was the first time that the collection of a very comprehensive set of data disaggregated by gender was conducted by the whole region, by the Western Balkans, actually. I have Ms. Codrescu also with her hand raised. Yes, please.
Thank you, Juliana. A few things. First of all, we owe it to the civil society to actually have gender-based violence in the ATT, because that was one of their most and still is they are the main vectors to having states address this issue. Now, from the implementing perspective of the licensing authority, especially when it comes to exports, I think what we need in our daily work, again, is concrete tools, and maybe the research community, as it has done in many other areas, can help this our work by somehow providing tools, and also by raising awareness at a global level through their studies on how to collect data and how to use and process that data. I think also the research community and the civil society have done and are still doing a great job of creating awareness on the topic by events such as this one. Because from the perspective of the licensing authority, if it's not something very tangible, if you don't really have tools, it's very hard to devise a policy. And this is something that the ATT as a discussion platform can contribute to as well in the exchanges in the working groups. To bring the discussion deeper from the political perspective that we all embrace, the principle we all embrace. The problem is, how do we apply it? Do we have the tools? Or how do we build the tools to apply it? And this talks to legal tools. Everything has to be translated in the legal framework that we work against. So I think this is the missing piece or pieces in the puzzle right now. And we're still developing this in the concept of this conversation in the ATT and beyond the ATT. And there is one more thing, and I will be very brief. Part of this puzzle also concerns regulation of imports, because addressing the problem of gender-based violence mainly from the perspective of the exporter doesn't fully address the problem. And I don't want to speak on behalf of my colleagues from the police department who are directly involved in dealing with this, but licensing imports and having a direct control on the use of firearms in the civil population, I think this is one of the levers for addressing domestic gender-based violence with firearms. I think this is not enough talked about, and I'm glad to say that in the multi-year work plan in the ATT, we will start addressing the matter of imports. Now, the ATT is not binding on licensing imports. It's rather lenient on this end, but coming with experiences and best practices from countries which do implement a sort of licensing or control over imports, not has to do with licensing, but a sort of control of imports of firearms, particularly, I think this will complete the picture. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot for highlighting once again the complexity and also the challenge of the practical implementation, actually, when it comes to the of the legal tools in preventing the gender-based violence, and also looking at both imports and exports. And I think also the work on the gender-sensitive licensing of firearms, it's a very let's say it's an important work in this regard. Miss Eltiona Metani, I see she raised her hand. She's from the licensing authority in Albania, actually. So maybe she can also bring some very important insights or questions.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Juliana. I would like to thank all of the speakers about the raising this issue in this level, because I could not say that in Albania we are not working in this field. So we are working in gender issue, and we have also our action plan, and we work in this field in a commission of small arms and light weapons. But in our Albanian export control authority, we don't have this catchable issue that we can work and raise this in this authority, and how can we implement in our legal framework, and how can we use in our practice. So I would like to maybe some of our colleagues here can help us in this field, or share their documents. This is so we can implement this in our legal framework as we are working in this field. And also, how can we use this in our practice or daily work? Because according or in my point of view, we have very few raising problems or lack of this gender balance in our Albanian Export Control Authority. So if you or some of our colleagues help us tell us how can we make this thing happens in practice, I will gladly thank you, and thank you for the organization of this meeting.
Thank you very much, Ms. Metani, also from your side, and also for highlighting from your perspectives as well, again, the challenges of translating legal commitments into practice, into concrete practices as well. Is there anyone from the speakers? I can also take the question from Mr. Senad Slater. I see the hand raised, and then I can invite finally any of the speakers for any final feedback.
Hi, good afternoon. Senad speaking from Sarajevo, from UNDP Bosnia and Herzegovina. Thank you for having us today. And I know it's Friday afternoon. I'm going to be really brief. I was listening to Simona, and I have one question for her, if it's possible. I was listening carefully. Very interesting topic when it comes to licensing and gender aspect of licensing, export-import licenses. Can you please tell us if you had a case so far where you have denied either exports or imports, taking into account this human rights violations of the country? No, okay, just wanted to know if we have a precedent already.
No, unfortunately, unfortunately, it is what it is. No, and this is why I said previously that we need to have a legal grounding for this. I mean, we have something, but we also need to have a very strong reasoning for our denial. And this still needs to be built upon. Right now, the legal reasoning we can have is for overall human rights violations. I mean, that's the main criteria. But we are working on this, and I have to say, at the level of the EU, in the process of the review of the common position, which is still going on, we are looking at maybe refining the tools and also the wording that relates to gender-based violence, the criterion of prevention of gender-based violence. And coming back to my colleagues from Albania, I think this is the support that can be granted by the ATT in the developing of that's what we have. We have right now a proposal for developing a good practice paper for this implementation of gender-based violence risk assessment. So this is at least one of the fora any state party can look at to actually gain some wisdom and some experience and some good practice to implement on our own practices. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this would be actually the last intervention because we are running like late on a Friday afternoon, so I cannot but be blamed. But I think the discussion actually was quite interesting, and both the interventions and also the feedback and comments we received from the participants. So let me just thank once again for all the speakers. Each of the speakers highlighted a unique point of view, a specific point of view, but actually bringing some very common challenges and also some very common priorities when it comes to preventing gender-based violence or domestic violence, and working towards a gender-responsive arms control. I will now give the floor to Ms. Renata Hesman-Delacqua, who is the head of the Gender and Disarmament Program in UNIDIR, for her concluding remarks.
Thank you very much, Juliana. And I won't try to summarize the discussion we had today, just because it was so rich in different aspects. But I hope you all enjoyed and found it interesting. I really learned a lot. And I could see how the issue of gender-responsive arms control and also gender-based violence needs to be tackled at different levels: grassroots, national, regional, international, multilateral. And it's really a pleasure to have this opportunity to hear from you. And I hope we can work together to develop these tools, to raise awareness, and to take forward a vision of arms control that goes beyond only the arms limitation, but also takes into account the human element and how these weapons are affecting people on the ground and what can we do to protect them. I think it would have been better if we were in person together. It would be lovely, you know, to continue this conversation in the corridor over a coffee. Unfortunately, this is not the case. This time we are meeting virtually, but I would like to say, you know, that we at UNIDIR in Geneva, we stand ready to collaborate with you in capital, in the region. And also if you're coming to Geneva for the ATT, you're all invited, you know, for a coffee in our offices. It would be our pleasure to welcome you. In terms of a follow-up, this meeting was recorded. We'll be sending everyone an email next week with the recording of the meeting and also some resources by UNIDIR, by UNDP, SEESAC, and other partners, which I hope you find useful. And I'm really looking forward to staying in touch. Thank you very much to our partners, UNDP, SEESAC, to everyone who participated, to our wonderful speakers. And I wish you all a wonderful Friday and a happy weekend ahead. Thank you.